Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the State Department. Today we're joined by Acting Coordinator for Counterterrorism, Justin Ciberel, who will provide an overview of key aspects of the 2015 country reports on terrorism, and then take some questions from you all. And then after, of course, the Acting Coordinator's Ciberel's briefing, I'll be on hand to answer any other questions you might have. Justin.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. Today, the State Department is issuing the Country Reports on Terrorism, which describes the counterterrorism landscape during the last calendar year and fulfills an important congressional mandate. The report allows us to regularly assess our effectiveness and make informed assessments about policies and priorities and where to place resources. In 2015, the United States faced a dynamic and evolving terrorist threat environment. The international community made important progress in degrading terrorist safe havens, in particular a sizable reduction in the amount of territory held by the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, in Iraq and Syria, as well as the finances and foreign terrorist fighters available to it. At the same time, however, instability in key regions of the world, along with weak or non-existent governance, sectarian conflict, and porous borders, continue to provide terrorist groups like ISIL the opportunity to extend their reach, terrorize civilians, and attract and mobilize new recruits. According to the statistical annex prepared by the University of Maryland and appended to the report, the total number of terrorist attacks in 2015 decreased by 13% when compared to 2014. Total fatalities due to terrorist attacks decreased by 14%, principally as a result of fewer attacks and deaths in Iraq, Pakistan, and Nigeria. This represents the first decline in total terrorist attacks and resulting fatalities worldwide since 2012. At the same time, there were several countries, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, Syria, and Turkey, where terrorist attacks and total deaths increased in 2015. Although terrorist attacks took place in 92 countries in 2015, they were heavily concentrated geographically, as they have been for the past several years. More than 55% of all attacks took place in 5 countries: Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Nigeria. And 74% of all deaths due to terrorist attacks took place in 5 countries: Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Syria, and Pakistan. While I cite these statistics, which are compiled by the University of Maryland and are not a U.S. government product, I must emphasize that the numbers alone do not provide the full context. This is a point we consistently make whether the numbers rise or fall on a year-to-year basis. The United States and our partners around the world face a significant challenge as we seek to contend with the return of foreign terrorist fighters from Iraq and Syria, the risk of terrorist groups exploiting migratory movements, and new technology and communications platforms that enable terrorist groups to more easily recruit adherents and inspire attacks. ISIL remained the greatest terrorism threat globally. Despite the losses it sustained last year, ISIL continued to occupy large areas of Iraq and Syria. ISIL's territorial control in Iraq and Syria reached a high point in spring 2015 and began to diminish thereafter. It is worth noting that ISIL did not have a significant battlefield victory in Iraq after May of last year, and by the end of 2015, 40% of the territory ISIL once controlled in Iraq had been liberated. This number has continued to increase in 2016. ISIL-aligned groups have established branches in parts of the Middle East, North Africa, West Africa, the Russian North Caucasus, and South Asia. Most of these branches are made up of pre-existing terrorist networks, many of which have their own local goals. The al-Qaeda core, which has been degraded severely since 2001 but still poses a threat, and al-Qaeda affiliates, notably al-Shabaab, al-Nusra Front, and al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, as well as ISIL and its branches, were responsible for a number of high-profile mass casualty attacks in 2015. These included attacks in Paris, the January attack on the offices of Charlie Hebdo, and the multiple attacks in November at a music concert, on restaurant terraces, and outside a sporting event. Other such attacks occurred in Beirut, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Tunisia, and the bombing of a Russian passenger plane in Egypt. There were also a number of attacks here in the United States carried out by lone offenders and in some cases inspired by ISIL, including in San Bernardino, California, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Garland, Texas. Although ISIL did not claim responsibility, we believe that it is responsible for several sulfur mustard attacks in Iraq and Syria, including a sulfur mustard attack in Maria, Syria on August 21st of last year. ISIL's loss of territory in Iraq and Syria also had the effect of diminishing the funds available to it. ISIL relies heavily on extortion and the levying of taxes on local populations under its control, as well as oil smuggling, kidnapping for ransom, looting, antiquities theft and smuggling, foreign donations, and human trafficking. Coalition airstrikes targeted ISIL's energy infrastructure, modular refineries, petroleum storage tanks, and crude oil collection points, as well as bulk cash storage sites. These airstrikes degraded ISIL's ability to generate revenue. The United States continues to work to disrupt Iran's support for terrorism. Iran remained the leading state sponsor of terrorism globally. As explained in the report, Iran continues to provide support to Hezbollah, Palestinian terrorist groups in Gaza, and various groups in Iraq and throughout the Middle East. Confronting Iran's destabilizing activities and its support for terrorism was a key element of our expanded dialogue with the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council following the Leaders' Summit at Camp David in May of last year. We have also expanded our cooperation with partners in Europe, South America, and West Africa to develop and implement strategies to counter the activities of Iranian allied and sponsored groups such as Hezbollah. A key trend through 2015 was the increased level of international cooperation and coordination to address terrorist threats. The United States-led Global Coalition to counter ISIL, the multinational joint task force established by the Lake Chad Basin countries to confront Boko Haram, and the efforts of the Horn of Africa nations to coordinate efforts against al-Shabaab in Somalia are examples of this ongoing cooperation and evidence both of an increased appreciation for the importance of a coordinated effort and of the political will to bring it about. We've seen countries across the international community mobilize to put in place fundamental reforms to address the supply and transit of foreign terrorist fighters attempting to reach the conflict in Syria and Iraq. United Nations Security Council Resolution 2178, adopted at a UN Security Council session in September 2014, chaired by President Obama, provided the framework for this effort. In line with that resolution, 45 countries have passed or updated existing laws to more effectively identify and prosecute foreign terrorist fighters. The United States has concluded information sharing arrangements with 55 international partners to identify and track the travel of suspected terrorists, and the number of countries contributing foreign terrorist fighter profiles to Interpol has increased 400% over a 2-year period. As countries have taken these steps, it has become more challenging for foreign terrorist fighters to travel unimpeded to Iraq and Syria. We are beginning to see the flow of foreign terrorist fighters to this conflict zone decrease. This decrease, we assess, reflects the combined effects of sustained battlefield losses, recruiting shortfalls, and increased border security efforts by source and transit countries. These challenges were acknowledged in reported remarks by ISIL spokesperson Abu Muhammad al-Adnani just last month. Another trend to note in 2015 was the increased global realization of the need for an expanded response to the challenge of international terrorism. In February 2015, President Obama convened the White House Summit on Countering Violent Extremism, which brought together government, private sector, and civil society leaders from around the world to raise awareness of the importance of an expanded effort to counter violent extremism and radicalization to violence. Leaders and community-based representatives from the United States and countries around the world came together at the summit and at a series of follow-on meetings in Algiers, Astana, Nairobi, Nouakchott, Oslo, Singapore, Sydney, and Tirana, in acknowledgement that our combined efforts, however successful in many respects, are not sufficient and must also include a more deliberate focus on the drivers of radicalization and recruitment to terrorist groups. Building on this work, last week we released the first ever joint State Department USAID strategy to counter violent extremism. And I invite you to take a look at it if you haven't already. It's available on the State Department website. A key element of that strategy is to empower and amplify locally credible voices that can challenge the terrorist narrative and thereby weaken terrorists' ability to radicalize and recruit new members. This will be the focus of the newly established Global Engagement Center under the leadership of Michael Lumpkin. Looking forward, our policies and programs will continue to be aligned to counter the evolving threats described in the report. We will continue to devote resources toward improving counterterrorism capabilities of key partners, countries, including by leveraging funding provided by the Congress through the Counterterrorism Partnerships Fund, as well as focusing long-term efforts in addressing the underlying causes that contribute to violent extremism. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take your questions.
I've got just a kind of a brief one on Iran. In both the section on the state sponsors and the Near East section, Iran is mentioned as supporting militants in Bahrain. But it doesn't say anything about the concern about their support for the Houthis in Yemen. And I'm just wondering, do those concerns not exist anymore, or does that not fit into this report because you don't or do consider the Houthis to be terrorists? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out why there's no mention of it. There's mention of Iran's destabilizing activity elsewhere, just not there.
Yeah, we're concerned about a wide range of Iranian activities to destabilize the region, and that includes certainly their support for some of these ally groups, proxy groups that operate in Iraq and in Bahrain and various parts of the Gulf region. And so those are issues that we took up in our conversation with the Gulf cooperation countries after the Camp David summit and developed an entire agenda to focus on those destabilizing activities.
Yeah, but I mean, that's great, but that doesn't answer my question about Yemen.
Right.
Is there no concern that Iran
There's
is
a serious concern about Iran's
or is
activities in
that
Yemen, yes.
not germane to this report because you don't consider the Houthis to be terrorists? I don't know.
Well, the Houthis are not a designated terrorist group.
I understand that.
And they're part of they're party to the conflict and part of the negotiations that are underway to resolve that conflict.
Okay, so
Iran's support for groups, including the Houthis, is a concern to us in terms of continuing to support sectarian activities.
Okay, but not a terrorism.
They're not a terrorist group.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, could I, very quickly, you mentioned 5 countries that have seen sizable rise in terrorism, which is Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nigeria, but you didn't mention Syria as one of those 5 countries, did you?
I think I mentioned Syria as a country that experienced more
Which means
attacks in
more
2015,
deaths,
yes.
But you did not mention Syria as one of the 5 countries that experienced terrorism.
No,
Is
that's
that-
well. No, I think I was referring to countries that had an increase in deaths or in terrorism. Those are from
Because,
statistics
no,
reported by the
two-
University of
two
Maryland.
different
Right?
things. You said there were 5 countries that have seen sizable rise in terrorism, and then those who suffered more deaths. I'm just curious.
So what I'm doing is I'm quoting from the University of Maryland Statistical Annex, which you can find as attached to the report. And in 2015, they report 382 total attacks in Syria. That's up from 232 in 2014. Total deaths, 2,748, up from 1,698.
Right.
Now, I think they acknowledge in their report the difficulty in getting credible reporting on attacks in Syria in particular. But those statistics are all included in the University of Maryland report, and that's what I was referring to in those remarks.
And just a quick one on the Palestinian part of this. For Hamas, the organization that you designate as a terrorist organization, what does it need to do to get off that list?
Well,
What
Hamas
does
needs
Hamas need to do?
Yeah,
to get
Hamas
off
has
that
been
list?
designated as a foreign terrorist organization. They
Right.
continue to sponsor attacks, terrorist attacks against Israeli citizens, and it's quite well understood what they would need to do to get off a terrorist list. But that's a significant. They'd have to completely change the orientation, effectively, of the group.
Okay, so they would have to, let's say, state certain things.
We see no
that would-
indication of an
okay,
interest
thank
by
you.
Hamas to do that.
A broader question, actually 2 broader questions. First of all, overall, how does the State Department hope these findings are used? And then secondly, do reports such as this one, in your opinion, change the situation on the ground, change the facts on the ground in terms of the fight against extremism, and if so, how?
The first question, how do we use the report? I provided you a summary broadly of some of the trends, but the report really consists of individual reports country by country. And in those country reports, we do seek to tie the report to categories of activity. For instance, efforts governments have undertaken to prevent the flow of finance to terrorist groups, efforts governments have taken to expand their own CVE efforts, understanding the roots of radicalization, taking actions against those, efforts that governments have undertaken to build more competent and capable security forces, including increased border security, et cetera. So the reports really on the country level are where we find changes on an annual basis, and they do provide us some guide as to our own efforts to build capacity and interact with those governments. On your second question with regard to how do we see, how does this affect the broader landscape, is that what it?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the overall trends, we seek to capture those in what we call our strategic assessment at the front of the report. I noted a couple of the major conclusions we took away from 2015. 2015, I think, can be marked in particular by this increased understanding among nations of the importance of coordinated action against terrorist groups. That, of course, is evidenced in particular in the global coalition against ISIL, which has had a really significant impact over the course of 2015. But also, as I noted, in the Lake Chad Basin countries, the Horn of Africa, elsewhere, it's a demonstration of the importance of diplomacy and coordinated action. The second would be the countering violent extremism agenda, which played out in 2015, beginning with the President's Summit on Countering Violent Extremism in February. That led to a whole series of activities globally to draw greater attention to the importance of addressing the drivers and roots of radicalization, culminating ultimately in a report by the UN Secretary General that is to be debated actually later this month at the UN. That would be appended to the UN counterterrorism strategy, which also gives countries guidelines effectively to broaden their approach to counterterrorism.
Has ISIS expanded its reach in the last year?
They have in some places, yes. They have in a couple of different ways. One, by inserting operatives into other theaters, notably into Libya, where you've seen leaders come out of Iraq and Syria and seek to associate with pre-existing radicalized groups in Libya. But they've also associated themselves with existing organizations. We saw that with Boko Haram, of course, and thereby expanding their reach. But in most of those cases, those groups themselves have come under some pressure locally and with greater or lesser degrees of success. But it is true that while their control of territory in Iraq and Syria has shrunk, they have expanded in some parts around the world, and that's where we address the issue of the branches of ISIL.
And just to follow up, you mentioned that ISIS did not have any specific battlefield victories since May 2015, but what would you call the attacks in Paris and Brussels?
I said in Iraq. I specified in Iraq, so that was linked specifically to Iraq. It's different even in Syria, where the picture, they've lost a lot of territory as well in Syria, but they've had some expansion in some areas, but greater losses as well in Syria. But absolutely, that's the case. Those external attacks that I alluded to, including in Paris and then in this year, of course, in Brussels, are evidence of a commitment as well to commit attacks outside of that central battlefield.
Are you concerned that the ISIS threat is expanding around the world?
I think we have to remain vigilant, certainly. I mean, this is a group that does espouse a philosophy and an ideology that is global in its intent. And so countries have attuned to that danger, and I think we've seen it in evidence. So clearly it's a global concern, and we require a global response to address it.
Does the report shed any light about any relationship between the Assad regime and ISIL, Daesh?
The report, of course, Syria is a state sponsor of terrorism, and it's identified in the report. And the Assad regime is responsible for in its refusal to engage in any kind of meaningful negotiation, has driven the conflict. And that conflict itself has served as the enabling environment in which ISIL and other organizations have arisen. And frankly, the conflict itself is the threat, and that's why it is so important, these efforts underway, to bring an end to it and to find a negotiating solution to that conflict in Syria.
Thank you, Mark. Sir, you mentioned Pakistan among the 5 countries, and also this report comes after 5 years of killings of Osama bin Laden and also Omar Mullah. Both were killed in Pakistan. anything have changed? And also, before this report came out, have anybody spoken with the Pakistani authorities and any change are taking place there, or they are cooperating with the U.S. or the global community on counterterrorism? And do you think that as far as ISIL, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS, all these new names are coming, you think this is what you call old wine in a new bottle?
My reference to Pakistan at the beginning of the in my remarks related to the comparison of attacks in 2014 to 2015. And there was a decrease in attacks in Pakistan in 2015 compared to 2014. 2014 was a particularly violent year in Pakistan, I think, as we know from attacks in the schools and et cetera. And the Pakistani government undertook a robust response against a number of the militant groups and throughout that end of 2014 into 2015. Pakistan's a key counterterrorism partner, and we have an ongoing conversation with the Pakistani government of the need to address militant activities in Pakistan, and will remain a key partner in confronting terrorism in the South Asia region.
And so finally, where do we stand as far as the U.S. and India are concerned, and when the Prime Minister Modi is coming next week on this counterterrorism?
Well, the U.S.-India partnership is a very strong one and robust across a number of sectors to include security issues, and those will absolutely feature centrally in the discussions during the Prime Minister's visit.
Thanks, sir.
David, last question.
You mentioned on the first page of the strategic summary that one of the factors generating an environment in which terrorism develops is where states use either through corrupt courts or corrupt politicians or security forces abuses have shut off legitimate means of political expression. Is that a growing problem, or has that been a constant? And I'm thinking, obviously, in particular of Turkey, Egypt, Bahrain, where there have been some pretty significant clampdowns on civil society, and they've also been terrorist issues.
You know, as we've looked at what is driving some of the radicalization, there is quite well understood linkage in some cases between repressive policies of governments, including in its security practices, as a contributing factor in some cases to radicalization. So we do understand that there is that linkage, and we have articulated this in as you noted in the summary of the report, the importance that governments approach their counterterrorism efforts in a manner which protects civil rights and inherent human rights. And that's an important approach, and one in which we see no conflict. There is no reason that governments can't prosecute an effective counterterrorism policy and at the same time protect civil rights of its populace. So that's a point we emphasize in our conversations with many governments around the world, and one that we will continue to do. And I think as we broaden out our effort to address countering violent extremism in this work, we will seek to identify more directly some of these linkages and emphasize those in our conversations with governments.
There is a brief mention in the Latin American section, the Americas section, about Iran. So again, goes to Iran. Have you seen, or did you see, between 2014 and 2015, an uptick in Iranian activity in Latin and South America?
Iran's presence in the Western Hemisphere and its support for groups that might be engaged in facilitation or operational planning is a continued concern.
Right.
And
has it gone up?
I don't think we've
Is it
seen
the
an
same?
increase in 2015 in Iran's activity in the Western Hemisphere, but it remains a high priority for us.
Yes,
One more
but,
question. I don't know your time, but looks like we have two more questions.
yes, without using the wine analogy, I'm trying to figure out if you consider ISIL is another version of Qaeda, or generally because it's as a part of discourse, political discourse over there in the region, and here in the political scene, they are using the word radical Islam. Do you think that there is a link between these things, or is just like people with guns and they are shooting other people? This is my first question. Second, if you don't mind, I mean, we are mentioning about strategic partnership with countries and military solutions. Meantime, all the efforts are done with the propaganda, which is used social media. Are you using social media, or do you consider social media a weapon of terrorism, or using a weapon of anti-terrorism?
Well, on the first issue, there's absolutely a linkage between ISIL and al-Qaeda insofar as ISIL grew out of the remains of what was al-Qaeda in Iraq. So they share a common heritage, and obviously the groups divided at a certain point between al-Nusra and what became ISIL in Syria. So they share a common, origin, and so therefore share many of the same objectives, goals. ISIL itself has been particularly brutal and has taken on a little bit of a different philosophy in tactics and the way it would approach, its objectives. But so there's absolutely a linkage there. I don't think this is an entirely new phenomenon. No. Secondly, on social media, I mean, what ISIL has been quite skillful in doing is making use of the internet as a platform for propaganda purposes and, more alarmingly, recruitment. And this is where it does differ from al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is an organization built around essentially clandestine cells that have, very strict sort of membership requirements. And ISIL is a group that is seeking to recruit from a number of different sources and openly including over the internet. But what we've understood is that while there may be ISIL's efforts at recruitment begin in the social media sphere through broad messaging, they are quite skillful in following that up through direct contact. There usually is some follow-up by a targeted ISIL approach to individuals. And so that's where the danger lies. We are quite concerned, and this is one of the motivations, obviously, for the reorganization we've done internally and the establishment of the Global Engagement Center, which is to more effectively counter the narrative that ISIL has
Just to
developed.
follow up this, I mean, the first part of the question, so do you prefer not to use the word radical Islam or Islamic extremism?
When we talk about terrorism, and this report is about country reports on terrorism, there is no association with any particular religion when we look at the issue of terrorism broadly. And so that's what this report seeks to do, to capture terrorism in all its forms.
Last question.
I might have missed this somewhere else in the report, but in the 2014 report, you state specifically that the rate of foreign fighter terrorist travel to Syria was more than 16,000 from 90 countries. In this year's report, you write that thousands of foreign terrorist fighters came from more than 100 countries. Is there a specific number for foreign terrorist fighter travel to Syria? Or?
Yeah. Well, the numbers that we have available to us come from analysis out of our intelligence community. And I think the most recent figures they've provided, and these are not calendar year 2015, this would be the most recent that I've seen, in excess of 40,000 total foreign fighters have gone to the conflict, and from over 100 countries. But it's been difficult, of course, to associate the numbers with a particular date and time, and that's because of the way that the numbers come in and the reporting. So it's been difficult to correlate. What we have seen, however, is a decrease in the ability, or the greater difficulty for aspiring recruits and travelers to access the conflict. And that's a result of a number of different steps that have been undertaken by governments in source and transit countries, in addition to the deteriorating conditions that have been experienced by ISIL in Iraq and Syria. And those challenges were, as I noted, identified specifically by their spokesperson's comments at the end of May, where he said that they've made it harder for you to access the caliphate. So there is direct acknowledgement by the group of a trend that we believe we've been seeing in the data.
So do you think, given that in 2014 the numbers were not quite accurate, and since you're saying there's a decrease in 2015, but it's 40,000 versus 16,000, was there a decrease? You saw a decrease in 2015?
No, I think the numbers continued. I mean, it's hard for me to identify a moment when the numbers would have tripped or changed. What I'm saying is that now we have seen a decrease in the numbers. But in 2015, you still had flows into the country. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay, thanks. All right. Hello, everyone. I said hello, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Sorry. A couple things at the top, and then I'll get to your questions. Beginning with Honduras, the United States, as part of its effort to promote good governance and economic prosperity through the U.S. Strategy for Engagement in Central America, announced today a contribution of $5.2 million to establish a secure foundation to advance the work of the OAS mission to support the fight against corruption and impunity in Honduras. And this is commonly known by its Spanish acronym, which is MASI. MASI continues momentum initiated by the Honduran government and people toward meaningful action against corruption, including criminal investigations and prosecutions of those who offer or receive illegal inducements. And we urge other states and international organizations to help ensure that MASI has the resources necessary to achieve its mission. Also, I just, before moving to your questions, I did want to mention some good news out of Ukraine. We do congratulate the Ukrainian Rada on the passage today of constitutional amendments and implementing legislation to improve judicial independence, accountability, and efficiency. This is an important step in Ukraine's fight against corruption and towards fulfilling the aspirations of the Ukrainian people for a more open and transparent judiciary that works for all Ukrainians. With that, Matt?
Right. So I have, I want to start with something that came up yesterday.
Yeah, sure.
I was not at yesterday's briefing, and I don't want to go belabor or go tread the same ground that was trod yesterday as it relates to the video, the editing of the video of the December 2013 briefing. But I did in reading the transcript of yesterday's briefing, I raises more questions, kind of, I think, than the explanation that your colleague offered.
Okay.
And so I want to get to a couple of points, and I'll try to be very quick about it.
Sure.
Like, is it correct, or am I understanding correctly, that until yesterday, or until whenever it was that Kirby came down with these new rules, that it was not specifically a violation of any rule or State Department regulation to manipulate a video of the briefing? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well,
It was not,
was it-
as
why?
far as we have checked in terms of our Foreign Affairs Manual, but also in other rules and regulations, it was not a clear policy or regulation prohibiting editing of transcripts before
Well-
they were publicly posted.
Well, I mean, you obviously you edit transcript. We're talking about the video here, not
I'm sorry, video, yeah.
But, I mean, obviously, if someone, there can be cleanup editing of things. But this would seem to be, this stuff was deleted for content reason, not because, not for a technical hitch. in
No,
audio or
understood.
the video.
I mean, I understand.
That was
your-
not a violation of the rules until yesterday?
Again, there was no rule in place, and we only discovered this when we actually had the occasion to
I know, but why
investigate
not?
it.
I mean, I guess I understand now why people have to put warning labels on mattresses and stuff like that. I mean, this would seem to be just pure common sense that you don't mess around with what has been said from the.
And that may be partially the reason there was no rule in place, is that, we all understand working in this business, whether on your
Well,
side or on our side, that there are,
But apparently not. You say we all, but someone out there didn't.
understood,
Right.
and that's why we're correcting it going forward.
All right. Am I correct in understanding that you guys, Kirby, your office didn't do it, had no part of this? It was all done by the legal advisor's office?
The actual investigation into the incident was conducted by the legal office.
And they found that there were no rules violated?
No.
No, they did not find
They
that?
found that there were no rules, yeah, there was no existing policy or regulations in place that would have been violated by editing this video.
That's just mind-boggling. I mean,
We were
So-
equally surprised.
yeah, so did they, to the best of your knowledge, did they ask the technician who they spoke to, who said that she was asked to do this, did they ask her what the reason was for the request to edit the video?
And I want to be careful here not to get too much into the substance of their investigation. They did talk to the person who did edit the video, who told them that this person told them that they were acting in direct response to a call that they received.
Yeah, I know that. I read the transcript.
Asking them to edit the video. Which,
Did
I'm
they
sorry, what's
say,
your-
did they ask the technician why that request was made?
No,
Of,
I mean,
no?
well, I'm sorry, when you say why the
Did
request
the
was made.
legal advisor's office, in speaking with the technician who did the edit, ask the technician what the reason was that the person, whoever got in touch with, he or she, gave for saying, let's remove this
So
7 to 8
my understanding of this is that that question was posed. The person was simply acting under order to change it and did so, but was not given
So
a
there was-
reason why.
was not given a reason why. Okay, I mean, it just seems like there's a bit of it seems to be a lack of curiosity here on that. I mean, if someone was to ask me, if Superior asked me to do something like that, I think I would want to know why before I would even consider doing it. But in this case, the person just got the request and did it of their own volition.
Correct.
Was everything contained, the request and the initial request, which I understand was like secondhand,
Right,
to this building?
yes.
Was there any, it was all contained, so
Yes.
not,
So
not,
my
didn't
understanding
come
is
from
that,
outside,
my
not the White
understanding was
House?
that, yes, it was, so the request was, and we still don't know obviously who made that request, but that was passing on a request from somewhere else within the Public Affairs Bureau.
Okay, and but you're certain of that? If this,
I mean, that's what this individual said, and that's what we're.
But yeah, there's no way that you can, I just.
No, we can't, I mean, we obviously can't, I mean, you know, we have one person's word to go by, yes.
Well, okay, and do you consider now that this whole case is closed?
No, and I think Kirby said as much yesterday, that if we get new information,
You mean if someone volunteers it?
well, I mean, we've pulled on this particular thread as far as we can go. The individual in question here does not remember who told him or her to carry out this order. It was a phone call that took place 3 years ago. We're not going to question their memory, but at this point, we believe that we've done the forensics. We've identified that there's a problem here, which you identified, which is that there's no policy regarding editing of video. We're correcting that going forward. But if we get new information as to where this request came from, we will investigate further.
But you're not going through the roster of staff that there was at the time?
We've looked at all that. I mean,
And
I think you can rest assured that we have obviously taken common sense steps to look at.
Well, apparently, I don't know if we can rest assured that you're taking common sense. It would
Well,
be
we
common
have.
sense not to edit the video in the first place. If common sense were what we were operating on here, our assumption of common sense, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. Anyway, is the Office of the Legal Advisor or anyone else still actively trying to find out who and why, or is it just done?
We believe we've carried out the necessary investigation. We have hit a dead end in terms of finding out more information. If more information does become available, if we are made aware of more information about who might have been behind this request, we'll of course investigate.
Well, to what end though? If it was not a violation.
You're right. I mean, that's a fair point. There isn't any, sorry, I'll get to you in a second. I mean, that's a fair point to make. This was not in any violation of existing policy or regulations.
But should have been, correct?
We're correcting that going forward.
So here's my
Yes, sir.
question.
Go ahead.
I mean, yesterday, Kirby made very clear that he believed that this was wrong. This shouldn't have happened,
Yeah.
correct? Do you believe that the State Department should have working for it people who would deliberately alter the historical record of the public statements of the State Department spokesperson?
I'm sorry, so your question is directed at?
Should people who would deliberately tamper with the historical record be working here?
Well, Arshad, I mean, I guess that's a fair question to ask. You know, our posture on that is that without having an existing policy in place, clearly laying out that this sort of action was prohibited, we need to give this individual the benefit of the doubt that they were acting under orders of their supervisor or supervisors or other people who directed them to carry out this task.
So, but wait.
Oh,
Question is not about the person who actually.
Forgive me, I got a whole bunch more questions that are raised by your answer then. So I'm not talking about the editor, okay, because you know who they are.
Okay.
I'm talking about, and I'm not even really talking about the person who placed the phone call at the behest of someone else, because they could have been just ordered, please do X. I'm talking about the person who originated the request.
Okay, so let me answer that
So should
question.
they be here in public affairs?
So, as Kirby said yesterday, and I'll reiterate today, you know, we believe that this was an inappropriate request and an appropriate action. But it did not violate any rules that were in place at the time that governed that sort of action.
So it's fine if for them to still be here. Tampering with the historical record is okay as long as there's no rule
Arshad,
against it?
First of all, we don't have that individual or that individual's name.
I know. But the signal you're sending is anything that isn't explicitly prohibited is fine, even if you regard it as wrong or inappropriate. And I don't see how that's
That's
a
not
position.
at all the signal we're sending. In fact,
It is.
You know,
It is.
Assistant Secretary Kirby just today sent an email out to the entire Bureau explaining the change in policy and explaining the actions we've taken thus far to get to the bottom of this. You know, we have carried out an investigation. Actually, we had the legal office carry out that investigation. We didn't do it internally for obvious reasons. And until we find reason to pursue that investigation further, you know, we're at a dead end. But that's in no way excuses the action that was taken. And I think Assistant Secretary Kirby has shown his commitment to the integrity of the Bureau and to the integrity of the State Department by taking the actions he's taken and being as transparent as possible and explaining why he's taken them.
You said that you'd done the forensics. Yesterday I asked if you had, for example, or the Office of the Legal Advisor had sought to obtain the telephone records, and the answer was not to his knowledge. Why not? I mean, forensics is a strong word. If you're doing the forensics to figure out how something happened, you don't just necessarily ask people, you also look for digital trails.
Sure.
So why didn't you look, or can you, you know, if you don't know, can you take the question of, well, did they look for digital trails? And I think a lot of phone calls around here are tracked, right? And I think PA phone calls in particular sometimes are tracked. So if you didn't look for the phone records, I don't understand how you can argue that you did thorough forensics on this.
Mm-hmm. I can't confirm that we did all of the tracking of phone calls or whether we're even able to do so. I know we did check our records as much as we could to see what might have happened that day. And you're right, there are records that exist. But you know, if I have more to share on that, I certainly will. But
can you check whether you looked for phone records, please, and answer that? And then, and I don't like dwelling on this, but I feel like, you know, the integrity of the public record is an important thing. It was clearly and deliberately violated by someone, right? And even if there wasn't a rule against it, presumably the State Department has basic codes of behavior, right? I mean, isn't there something that says you should be honest in your dealings with the public?
Well,
Apparently not.
well, look, of course, and we've talked about,
But
you
then
know,
it is a violation. If, of course, there's a rule that says you should be, or a basic precept that you should be honest in your dealings with the public, then somebody violated that.
and again, I'm not, it's impossible for me without knowing who directed this individual to carry out this task, what the rationale was, what the justification was, what the reasoning behind it was. So that's point number one. Point number two is there was no existing regulation or policy in place. We've addressed that. Going forward, we're putting in a clear policy in place that this kind of action is not going to be tolerated in the future. I think, you know, we can certainly, and you're right to point out the fact that, you know, that this was an inexcusable incident, but we also have to look forward and how do we correct this for the future? And we're setting in place a clear procedure and clear guidelines and how to avoid any action like this, because we do obviously take our role seriously.
We were told by a State Department official yesterday that the person who received the phone call discussed the matter with her superior, and that they concluded that the request had come from a place of sufficient credibility and authority within the department, within the bureau, excuse me, that they then acted on the request. Have you, or did the Office of the Legal Advisor go to people of credibility and authority in the bureau and ask them, did you do this?
We have asked those questions.
And nobody said they did it?
That's correct.
So
We've asked so far.
yeah. So what I don't understand, I continue to not understand how there could have been a conversation between someone and their manager that concludes that a request has come from a place of sufficient credibility and authority from the bureau they work in, that they should do this, but that they have no other recollection of anything about the call. The gender of the person who called? Do you know the gender of the person who called? Because that would cut your list of suspects in half.
I understand that.
Do you know the gender? Did they remember
Again,
the gender?
it was a secondhand call. Somebody was conveying this.
Right,
And
so
we
do they know the
that, and I'm
gender
not-
of the person
and we
who
do know
called?
that, and I'm not
Okay,
gonna share that.
so,
Yeah.
no, that's, okay, I mean, it's not very transparent of you, right? But then you have eliminated half the
I understand
potential
that.
people who made the call, and that makes it easier for you to find out, well, gee, who actually made the call, and then who told them to make the call?
And let's be very clear, when we're talking about transparency, I'm not going to get up here and reveal to you from this podium every detail of what is an internal, albeit by our legal office, an internal investigation into what happened. I'm under no obligation to do that, and that's out of respect for the privacy of the individuals involved. What I am obligated to do is to explain to you, and I think John did as well yesterday, that we realize that this was an intentional action. We've taken steps to address it. We've investigated the incident as far as we can take it at this point in time, and we're taking steps to correct that this incident, that a similar incident doesn't happen in the future.
And do you know the identity of the person who placed the call, relaying the message from the place where it originated?
No, we've not been able to clarify that either.
Sorry, Mike, you may not have an obligation, but apparently that there was no obligation before yesterday not to mess around with the video transcript, or the video. So I just, in the interest of transparency, in the interest of trying to set this aside, why not reveal the details of what the legal advisor found beyond what you have already done? Or is that it? Is that all that they know?
More or less it.
Because
but-
it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like a very thorough investigation. Well, someone got a phone call passing on a request from someone else, and that's the end of it. That doesn't sound like, anyway. Can you at least tell us what the new policy is specifically? Like, what does this email that Kirby sent around today say
Sure.
in terms of what the regulation is? Thou shalt not edit.
I mean, that shall not,
What?
fair point, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay,
But,
can we get it?
yeah, of course, I can get you the text. I mean, we're gonna make clear that all video and transcripts from daily press briefings need to be immediately and permanently archived in their entirety, and that.
Including anything with glitches, like audio or video glitches?
Yes.
So it will be naked, unedited?
Unedited, naked, if you will.
Can I make a point about?
Well,
the
can you finish that?
No,
What
no,
else?
I'm just saying, and, you know, and in the unlikely event that narrow, I don't know, compelling circumstances that require edits be made, like the inadvertent release of privacy protected information, that just as an example, that would only be made with the express permission of the Assistant Secretary and with an
Any
approved.
edit at all has to go to the Assistant Secretary?
That's correct. That's
He
correct.
also said yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, that it would be annotated so that
That's
the
correct. Yeah, I was
initial
just gonna
was
get to that.
noted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that policy also apply to the transcripts? State Department transcripts? And I do not want anybody to think that I have anything but the highest regard
No,
for
no,
the transcribers.
it should
But-
already
but-
be the case.
Well, but it should have been the case
We
that.
always
that-
asterisk if we do an
But-
annotated, an annotation to the transcript, to the written transcript.
It pains me to ask the question, but
Yeah.
it should have already been the case that tampering with the video violated a rule, but it didn't until yesterday. So are there going to be similar rules regarding the transcripts
Yes,
for all State Department officials who speak on the record, including in the briefing?
yes, and there should be.
And you will annotate any changes to the actual spoken word as transcribed?
Yes.
Thank you.
So one point I have to make, and a question I have.
I'm
about
sorry,
the
is that in the
edits.
latest email? Is that in his
I'll double
latest thing?
check on that.
Okay.
This may just pertain to video, but that's a fair question to check.
Um,
Please.
Okay, so one question is, the edit itself was, anybody who's looked at video could see that it was a flash edit. It in no way resembled a technical malfunction. In fact, it resembled experienced editing. So why then, the question is, why then was it initially called a technical glitch when in fact it just didn't appear to be that at all? Where did that come from?
Look, so what I'll say to that is, I'm not sure that, you know, as a layman, I would have been able to say that it was a professionally done
Well,
editing job
that's
or
not-
or a
frankly,
glitch. I'm
that's
just
not
saying.
plausible.
I'm just saying. So understand that we're all not broadcast experienced press officers here at the State Department. That said, we did recognize, Justin, very shortly after that initial response, that it clearly was, and we were told that internally. And so we corrected ourselves once we found that out.
Not only do I not find that plausible, but I also don't find it plausible that the technician, as Arshad mentioned, does not remember who gave this order. Did anybody ask the technician if this was the only time she had been asked to edit a video, or was this a standalone, one-time deal?
My understanding is it was a standalone.
Okay,
request.
which they would remember doing, but not remembering who gave the order. Do you have any reason to believe that that it was the then spokesperson, Jen Psaki, who ordered the edit, or have you ruled her out?
So Jen Psaki has gone out publicly.
I've heard, yeah, I've seen
And
that.
said that she had nothing to do, no knowledge of this, and nothing to do with this incident. You know, Jen Psaki is a highly regarded professional and colleague, and I take her at her word.
And last one for me, do you find it necessary maybe for the press office to do its own investigation, or are you totally satisfied with the legal office's own investigation of this? I mean, if anybody would know.
So,
I would think it
sure.
would be.
I mean, what we did was, we specifically picked the legal office to do this because we didn't want, we wanted an objective and unaffiliated body to look at the incident. And that's what they were able to do. As to your questions about, what this person knew or what they didn't know, ultimately, we have to take them at their word, that they don't remember who gave them the order. And as I said, if we come across more information that sheds light on that, we'll certainly pursue it.
Did you ever consider punishing the technician?
We have not, no.
And why not?
Well, again, because they were simply carrying out an order and they were not violating any existing
So you're
regulations at
told.
the time.
I mean, you're taking their word for it that they were carrying out an order. I
We
mean, you
are.
have no proof of that.
You probably answered this before,
Independently,
but
please.
did you say that's the only time this happened? Was that like a?
Well,
single
I mean,
incident?
Kirby spoke to this yesterday. We have no, well, I don't want to say we have no capability, but unless you wanted us all to simply
Right.
Spend all of our time
I mean,
going
to the
through
best of your
every.
knowledge, that's the only time.
No, right.
And also clarification, you probably talked about it before, when you explained it.
We-
Was that immediately after, I mean, the day after, the day following? When did this happen?
I'm sorry,
When was it excised? When was it?
We believe it was the day of.
The day of.
And in terms of our knowledge, to our knowledge, it has not happened before or since, but we have no way of answering that definitively because we just don't have the manpower or the technology to go back and look at every videotape.
You don't have the,
Mark,
what? Maybe you might not have the manpower, but you certainly have the technology.
I mean,
right?
well, I mean, yes.
I mean,
We have
if you
YouTube,
want to
yes.
spend like 5 weekends,
Yes.
I mean, that's not, was there any thought given, was there any thought, you just said you wanted an independent and objective, impartial look at this, and you went to the legal advisor. Why not the IG?
IG doesn't really do this. We talked about that, actually.
Oh, okay.
And they don't really do this. I mean, they
Yesterday.
do broader investigations.
You said that the person who originally ordered this cut didn't break any existing regulations at the time.
Yeah.
You've since asked a lot of people whether they did it. They've all said no. If they were lying, would that be a breach of regulations?
That's.
To lie to this inquiry.
I mean, that's
presumably
highly.
they went under oath.
I mean,
but
it's
they
a
have
hypothetical.
They have a duty of honor.
It's a reasonable question. Does
Sure.
the State Department have a rule against people lying to its own internal inquiries? Because if it doesn't, apparently it's A-okay to lie, and maybe somebody will write a policy the first time you catch somebody doing it. So, I mean, I think that's a very reasonable question. Do you have a policy
I
against
don't
lying?
know. I mean, I can't answer that definitively. That we.
But
I assume we do, but I
in the
don't.
opinion of your office, is the person honor bound to come forward? Enough time has been wasted. The person who ordered it knows they did it. Do they have a duty to stop wasting
If
everyone's
somebody
time?
wants to come forward with that, then we would welcome that, obviously.
But do they are they honor bound to do so? Is it the honest thing to do?
I mean, certainly, it's the ethical thing to do, but but
Is the legal office an unaffiliated body? You said it was an unaffiliated.
yes, it is. I mean, it's not connected to the public affair. I mean, it's obviously a State Department office, but they were able in this particular instance to play an objective role.
Why not do a truly independent investigation, though, like bring in an outside counsel? Often companies, when they have issues, and sometimes they ask their general counsel to investigate things. Other times they decide, and I realize it costs money, that you
Right.
should have an independent law firm come in and figure out what happened, because there are no relationships, no conflicts of interest, no people are not all
Understood.
reporting up to the Secretary of State.
Understood. We believe in this instance that the legal office is able to carry out an objective investigation.
Mark, how many people work for the Bureau of Public Affairs here?
And you were going to ask me a hard question like that. I'll get the.
That seems to be pretty easy.
I know. I should know that off the top of my head. I'm going to casually look over here and ask Elizabeth. 300.
Have you interviewed all 300 of those individuals?
No, we have not.
And why not?
Again, I mean, they're all aware of the incident, and if they, as David
They read the
offered,
paper
if they
next-
wanted
yes,
to put step forward. No, we only actually focused the investigation on those who would have been involved, and that is the people in the Office of Video Services.
And you're confident that it was someone from the Bureau of Public Affairs that made this request?
That's our, again, recognizing that we only have the testimony of one person to go by, that is our understanding, that request came from elsewhere in the Bureau of Public Affairs, correct?
You only looked at the Office of Video Services, you didn't
No,
ask
we-
people outside?
we did,
Like
as
in the
we-
PA, did you ask people in the PA front office, which is
Yes.
where authority is vested for PAs running, right?
Well, it's a different front office now, but yes.
No, I get that.
All these conversations were had, yes.
Following up on an earlier question that Arshad asked, couldn't you call the telephone company to figure out the records?
I'm not sure.
You said you
How
would
are you
take,
not sure?
I can look into it, but I'm not, okay.
you said you would take the question about whether,
I
yeah.
would take the question,
Whether the telephone company was called? Is that the question?
whether we have records of phone records. I'm not. I'm not
And whether
sure.
you tried to find them for this, it's one day, you know the date.
I'm aware.
Given the inconclusive nature of the investigation by you and the Office of the Legal Advisor, why wasn't this matter referred to the State Department's Office of Inspector General?
Well, I just tried to answer this to Matt. The Inspector General's office has a little bit of a different writ, if you will, and looks at broader issues or institutional processes. I mean, it does audits of embassies, it does audits of programs, it does this is a specific incident.
Email?
Now-
Do email as well?
Yeah, but I mean, no, but in all honesty, we felt like this was a little too specific for their purview.
His office could choose to take it up, though. It's not just things you refer to him.
I suppose they could, yeah.
Harf, Marie Harf, did you ask her?
Marie,
Good job,
and yes,
answer.
and she said she also had no knowledge of this, and certainly wouldn't have condoned it.
And finally, yesterday you stated that, or excuse me, Admiral Kirby stated that both Ms. Newland and Ms. Saki did their jobs, quote, credibly, honestly, and with integrity on the relevant days in question. Given that it is the universal conclusion that one of those briefers spoke falsely from the podium on one of those days, it seems appropriate to ask you, for the purposes of the record, the same question Ms. Saki was asked, quote, is it the policy of the State Department where the preservation of the secrecy of secret negotiations is concerned to lie to achieve that goal? Because only if you could answer yes, you could come to the conclusions you have about the job done by Ms. Newland on that day.
No, I mean, I think if you ask Ms. Newland, Toria, and certainly we have, and I've spoken with her personally about it, she had no knowledge at that date that we were conducting bilateral talks with Iran. And if you extrapolate or go forward in time to Jen Psaki's comments on that date, she was simply stating that sometimes negotiations, or rather diplomacy, needs a level of secrecy.
But that
She
wasn't a false statement.
condoning, it wasn't a false statement.
Right, it was Ms. Newland's statement that was false.
And I said she had no knowledge at the time that she made that comment that there were, in fact, negotiations going on with Iran.
If she had no knowledge, why would she say they're not going on? Isn't proving a negative a little difficult?
Because she was speaking on what she knew. I mean, I mean, pick a issue. If you'd asked me what I wouldn't offer that it was possibly happening. If to my best of my knowledge, I believed it wasn't, and that was her.
Couldn't she
starting
say, I'll
point.
find out?
Look,
Can I ask? to
I'll let my statement stand.
Can I ask to clarify one important point here? You basically said you ruled out that the White House was involved, yet you have no idea who made the order. How do you rule out the White House?
I mean, look, Justin. I mean, we've taken it, to the level that we've pursued this.
But you can't rule out.
I can't rule out that.
You can't rule out the White House. Is that correct?
I mean, I can't rule out, categorically that, Santa Claus didn't.
Or
call
the
and
White
order
House.
it. I mean,
Right, you would agree with that statement.
I just can't definitively say that anyone. I mean, all we know.
Well, that's why I'm
and
asking.
all I have
because you kinda-
shared.
Yeah. I'm
And
just
no,
asking
but
for
I'm not.
clarification.
Can't you say you'll find out?
Yeah, I mean, are you interested in finding out, or is it just is it a done deal? I mean, is it just now you're going to treat it as water under the bridge? I don't understand why you're satisfied with the legal advisor's investigation that stopped with the person who actually just did it and on instruction from someone else, and you doesn't go any.
I mean, we've hit a dead end. Arshad's, point notwithstanding that we could maybe unearth phone records and pursue that. I don't know if that's even viable. But we've hit a dead end, and, we're not, an autocratic government that can, force someone to say what they've already offered. This was a civil conversation.
Is out of the question, I suppose.
And Mark, one of the reasons I ask about the White House is because it's important to note that Ben Rhodes has been sort of accused of trying to manipulate the press on the whole scope of the Iran negotiation. So I'd ask you this: did you ask Ben Rhodes if he made the call to edit the tape?
We, as we often do, I've talked to our colleagues in the White House and the NSC about this and about a lot of issues. And look, I mean, that's a huge conclusion to jump to. We are, at this point, satisfied that this came from within the Bureau. We don't have any indication to believe that it came from outside the Public Affairs Bureau. If we get an indication that that was the case, then we'll pursue that. But at this point, we don't have that. So all we're doing, based on that knowledge, is taking steps moving forward to put in place procedures and regulations that will keep this from happening in the future.
And can I just repeat my plea for to get the new guidance?
Of course,
the
yeah.
new-
I think we can share that.
Are all of your talking points here at the State Department scrubbed by the White House when it comes to the subject of Iran?
No, but we often share with them, and they share theirs with ours. We often talk about whether it's Iran or any issue. As much as possible, we try to share information.
Is it just a coincidence that this particular exchange between my colleague James Rosen and Jen Psaki was on the subject of Iran?
Oh, I have no idea whether it's coincidental or not. I just don't know.
One more thing on this.
Yes, sir.
According to the Foreign Affairs Manual, it is the Telecommunications and Wireless and Data Services Division of the IRM Bureau that is responsible for, or maybe IRM is a subset of another bureau, but that is responsible for, but I thought they were their own, is responsible for telecoms for the department. Do you know if the legal advisor's office went to IRM to say, hey, do we have these records?
I don't.
Okay, can you take that one?
Sure.
And then also if you can see if there are records, I mean, it may be they don't keep them for 3 years. I have no idea. Maybe they keep them for 5, maybe they keep them for 6 months. I don't know. But if you can check how long they keep records, if they keep them.
Can we move on? Wait, I just want to make sure I got this from yesterday and also from today, and that is the conclusion that you have reached based on the limited investigation that has been completed so far is that this stuff was deliberately removed or edited out because of what the content was. Is that correct?
That was just too low.
Given,
Based on what you know.
based on what we know, yes, that is accurate.
And
Because it was a particular piece
So-
of the video that was removed. Particular exchange.
And because of that, you would reach there's no other reason that you have reached that conclusion. The only reason that you've reached that conclusion is that it's just that one part.
That's right.
And do you think, or is there a sense in the building that what was said in that edited portion was somehow embarrassing or incorrect?
No, and in fact,
Or-
so two points on that. One is, even though that portion was excised or edited, it was always available on DVIDs.
Right,
the
which makes it- which
the
would- which
Defense
would-
Video and Imagery Distribution System, so.
Which would make it,
And-
if it was an attempt to hide something, a particularly inept attempt.
Precisely.
Sloppy.
Which-
and really kind of stupid.
And
So-
secondly, we didn't view the exchange to be all that sensitive.
Precisely. I was sitting here in this same seat when it
So-
happened, and I didn't think much of it at the time, so I don't
So
understand
what
why.
that begs, the question is the rationale behind this, and I just don't have a good answer for you, Matt. I just don't.
Can we move on?
Yeah.
Can we- yeah, Syria? We talked
Yes,
about
Syria, yes.
Yeah, a little less dramatic. Can you update
How
us
sad that Syria is
on,
less
on the,
dramatic.
on the AIDS situation?
I can. So yesterday, as many of you saw, the United Nations, the ICRC, and the Syrian Red Crescent did deliver some badly needed humanitarian assistance to Daraya, as well as Muadamiyah. We have seen, however, reports that a full food shipment to Daraya that was anticipated for today did not move ahead. This is unconscionable, and we expect the regime to live up to its deal to allow full delivery to go forward. It was blocked, yes, that's our understanding.
So, it continues to be blocked. What is your contingency plan? Or, you have agreed to do
So-
perhaps some airdrops or
Right.
something like this.
So-
So what is next?
So, a couple of points to make on that. First, we looked to Russia to exert influence on the regime to live up to the arrangement that it agreed to. Because ground delivery does remain the best means to provide this kind of assistance to these besieged communities. And recent deliveries are far from sufficient to provide relief to the hundreds of thousands of people who've not received any relief in years. I think Daraya was 2012. Yeah. So, but at the same time, we are actually, and I believe the UN is meeting on this later today, but we do support the World Food Program moving forward on logistics, on how to carry out air operations to provide humanitarian assistance by air. They've looked at they're looking at a number of approaches. They've tried this in the past. It's just a very inefficient way to do it. And it would also have to be under, or with the permission of the Syrian Air Force. So there are some logistical hurdles to overcome if we do decide to move to airdrops.
My last question.
Yeah,
If the Syrian government allows these shipments to go through and so on, would that be an incentive to get the talk moving immediately or going right away?
Well, we've long said there should be no preconditions to the talks moving forward, but, this simple follow-through on allowing humanitarian assistance to reach these besieged communities would be, frankly, an easy way for the regime to send a message to the opposition and to the international community that it is willing to do the right thing. Please. You and
Syria issue.
Yep, but you have your hand up for, you,
Afghanistan.
oh, okay. For the Syrian.
Just to clarify, do you have a specific number quantitatively? What is the size of this humanitarian aid, and what is in compared to halting? Is it 25% of the, or 30% or 40% of what you are trying to do? And when you are going to the aid, humanitarian aid, targeting what? How many people?
You're talking about,
Today's
the first,
whatever
yeah.
blocked one.
I mean, the first question you asked, you're talking about,
What is the size of this humanitarian aid?
you mean, what is the size that we've been able to deliver thus far?
Tons.
Yeah, I did have that in here, but I don't seem to have it in my, what was delivered yesterday. I don't have it in front of me. What was your second question, if I can answer that?
And the second question, another number, which is those who are going to be affected by this aid, humanitarian aid, 100,000 people, 40,000 people.
Well, it's hundreds of thousands, and if you group in all of the besieged areas, I believe it's in the hundreds of thousands of people. But let me get you those numbers, okay? In terms of what needs to be delivered and where, or what was delivered. What are you asking for? What we did what has been delivered thus
Yes.
far? Yeah, we can get that for you. But that's also, I can also refer you to the UN. They're the ones who obviously are
Okay.
overseeing this process. Please, Afghanistan. Yeah.
Under the Freedom of Information Act, the Pentagon released the heavily redacted results of its internal investigation into a night raid in Afghanistan in 2010 in Gardes, which killed 7 people, including 2 pregnant women. The U.S. military had already apologized for that raid, but the internal investigation concluded that although, quote, tactical mistakes were made, the soldiers acted within their rights, followed standard operating procedures, so no one involved in that raid faced disciplinary measures or anything. I understand you will probably not speak to the details of this specific incident, but what should countries hosting U.S. soldiers expect when, even with apologies, there's little to no accountability when things go terribly wrong? In other words, can other countries really expect justice from the U.S. military's internal investigations?
Well, a couple of thoughts, and again, not having in front of me the specific report or incident that you're referring to, and I would have to refer you to the Department of Defense to really talk about the details of that incident. But generally speaking, and I think we talked about this, frankly, in light of another tragedy, which was the attack on the hospital in Helmand a few months ago. And Kunduz, did I say Helmand? I apologize. Kunduz, thank you. But the fact that we carried out very rigorous internal investigations into that incident that did hold individuals accountable. Again, I'd refer to the Department of Defense to speak to specifically what actions were taken, but it was career-ending for many of the, or some of the military officers involved in that incident, to my understanding. But I think generally speaking, the U.S. military holds itself accountable for its actions. And if there are credible allegations of either abuses or mistakes on the battlefield, that we carry out very stringent investigations looking at culpability.
Well, there are credible allegations that U.S. soldiers tried to cover up the killing of the women in Gardes, but the witnesses' accounts apparently had no effect on the results of the investigation. Do you think internal investigations are appropriate when it comes to horrible incidents like that night raid in Gardes?
I would say that the U.S. military does have a system in place that allows it to credibly investigate the actions of its personnel overseas, well, overseas in the United States as well, but on the battlefield. You know, I don't have the specifics of this incident in front of me, so I can't speak to that.
Would the U.S. welcome an independent investigation by perhaps an international body into this night raid in Gardes in Afghanistan?
Without knowing the specifics, I'm just not, you know, it sounds like an investigation was carried out by the U.S. military. I'd have to refer you to them to speak to whether an additional investigation would be warranted.
Has the U.S. ever welcomed an international independent investigation into an incident that involved the military overseas?
Off the top of my head, I can't speak to one, or I don't have one on the tip of my fingertips. But again, I'll reiterate the fact that you know, our internal investigatory services are second to none, and we do hold people accountable. Yeah, right.
Well, it's
I'm
only
talking
the,
about the US
maybe, I
I'm
know,
talking about
maybe
the
you
US
should give the
military.
briefing
I'm
video
talking about the
thing
US
over to the
military.
Pentagon if you have such confidence in their investigations, no?
India.
India.
If I may, with your permission, before my question on India, can we go back on quickly on terror report, please? He mentioned about 2 things. One, foreign fighters and foreign donations. Who is providing?
Who's providing foreign donations or foreign fighters?
Both.
Both.
Yes, sir.
Look, I mean, in terms of foreign fighters, we've talked about this a lot. Many of these individuals are recruited through social media. You spoke a little bit about that. It's something we need to address through countering violent extremism efforts, extremism rather, our efforts to counter violent extremism, and we're working with governments around the world to accelerate those efforts. But, you know, in terms of financing or funding, there's a variety of sources of funding for groups like ISIL, for example. And one of the efforts, the counter-ISIL efforts that we've had success with in the past 6 months has been really hitting those sources of funding, whether it's oil wells, whether it's money laundering, whatever, but being able to dry up the sources that it uses for its financing.
And finally,
Yeah.
as far as Prime Minister Modi's visit to U.S.-India relations are concerned, so much has been going on in town about his visit next week. What role do you think this building or diplomacy is playing as far as Prime Minister Modi's visit next week in the White House in Washington? I mean, is there any functions here? The Secretary is hosting any functions for him or to hosting him?
Well, I don't have anything to announce yet. Certainly, the Secretary will be involved with Prime Minister Modi's visit. You know, I can imagine there will be meetings at some level here at the State Department and perhaps some events. I just don't have anything to announce at this point in time, but obviously we're very much looking forward to Prime Minister Modi's visit. You know, the U.S.-Indian relationship is of incredible significance, not only to the region, but to the world. We have a broad bilateral and multilateral relationship with India and look forward to engaging on all those issues.
And Mark, finally, this may be the last visit of Prime Minister Modi under this administration. Anything new we are expecting? Because Prime Minister Modi will be there, still the Prime Minister of India, but maybe not this administration.
I mean, again, I don't have anything to preview today. As we get closer to the visit, perhaps we will. But, you know, the breadth of the U.S.-Indian relationship is wide. As we mentioned earlier, it addresses security. It's got a strong economic component. You know, we're looking to build closer relationships across the board with India because we see it as a vital partner in the region.
Thank you, sir.
That's it.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
guys.
much.